Hello, I'm Floyd Maxwell. This is a video on thinking your own thoughts. Something that we do, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, is think. But are they our own thoughts? The internet these days brings everything to our door, and we hunt and we gather so much information. But when do we process it? Don't we need a break to process it? And speaking of breaks, if you're at work and you're taking a break and someone comes along and disturbs you and says, "Hey, I need that letter typed," or they have something urgent they want to talk to you about. How do you feel about that? Generally, we don't like it. And yet, there are many cases where people pull off amazing stunts, like this guy swimming 15 miles in frigid waters, and seemingly his body doesn't even respond in any kind of a stressed way. It just sort of becomes normal. So it comes down to that, doing what you love, and the rest will follow. When you do something that you love, it's not work. I worked at a call center, that was work, so it's something the opposite of a call center. A call center environment is very structured and very measured and over-supervised, and of course people are trying to duck responsibility in a call center. Companies don't want to be responsible for things, so they want to put it on the user, and so it's sort of an insulting kind of an environment, anti-human environment. Good environment for a robot. Maybe one day they'll have robot call centers, and that'll be good. A change is as good as a rest. When we do a change, it's funny, we can be working really hard and we come home and we plow into some project we got, some hobby we have, and we can work really hard on it and it's not work. So these are sort of clues about what sort of things we can enjoy and not consider work. So basically what I'm saying is work on yourself. When you work on yourself, suddenly it will actually transform your whole day, your whole week, your whole life. Your whole life will stop feeling like work because you're working on the most important thing all the time. There is a problem with working on yourself, and that is, just like this You Asked For It show, where they try and change a tire on a car that's moving. When you work on yourself, you're trying to change your mind with your mind. And so if your mind has flaws or weaknesses or is uninformed about certain areas, how are you to change yourself in those areas when you're uninformed, when you have a flaw in your thinking? Well, there's sort of a cure for this, and that is to work on the hardest things first. It seems like some things are really hard, like quitting smoking or quitting drinking or, giving up meat and these kind of things. But it turns out these are the easy things to change. The reason is that they're kind of binary things. You're either doing them or you're not. Also, they're bad for you. Any kind of research will reveal that all three of those are bad for you. And so it's sort of, you have a kind of like a built-in incentive to not want to do those bad things. So therefore it becomes harder to quit things that have an important for you aspect, like eating has an important for you aspect. And so it becomes gray. You want to eat, you need to eat, but how much cheesecake is an acceptable amount? And so that's when it starts taking a little bit more work, a little bit more effort on your part, a little bit more determination and persistence to actually effect a change. So I say that small decisions can help. In other words, Rome's not built in a day. If you make some small changes, like stop bringing home steaks, don't go to restaurants that serve meat. There are lots of vegetarian restaurants. Tell your friends that you don't eat meat anymore. Then you get other people helping you, and the next thing you know, you're starting to make the change. Drinking's a little harder. Drinking, it's a physiological effect on your body. Your body becomes really dependent on it, and be careful. Go a little slower on that one. Still, you can do it. Smoking, it's mostly in our heads. I find with the smoking, because I went through that when I was in high school, junior high, it's one of those ones where you want to quit most of the time, but there are times when you're weaker. So get kind of systematic about finding out when are those weak moments, and have an alternative activity. So some people, after dinner, they crave a cigarette. Well, plan something different. Go for a walk. Do something after that. Maybe that's when you work on your special hobby, your new hobby, or that's when you start watching episodes from that new series that you bought on DVD. And speaking of hobbies, start a hobby. Start a whole new hobby that maybe it's something you always wanted to do. Maybe it's just something to get you away from that smoking habit. Emotion can affect our ability, our strength, take away our strength. And so learn to recognize it. Are you emotionally upset? Recognize it. Diagnose it. Put words to it. Try not to give in to it. And give yourself credit. This is a society, a life these days where we don't get a lot of give from others. Everyone's sort of out for themselves because it's kind of a wacky universe where, government keeps wanting to take more from us. So then it's kind of like the man comes home and he's angry and he gets upset at his wife, and then she turns on and gets upset at the kids, and the kids turn around and kick the dog. And so we have to sort of reverse that cycle. And so we have to learn to give ourselves credit and to give others credit. That's that bottom-up approach, which is much more healthy and positive. So it's going to take the patience, it's going to take determination and will to change your thinking. Unlike changing a flat tire in a moving car, the hardest part of changing yourself comes after you make the change. And the reason is that the thing you're trying to change, your mind hasn't fully changed yet. So that's, the smoking is a good example of that, where you say, I don't want to smoke, and you bust your cigarettes in half, and yet your mind hasn't fully adapted yet, hasn't fully changed yet. So I say, there's the real problem. What cycle are you working on? The tire on that car needs to be changed by you, in exactly the way that you specify. It's like with teenagers. As parents, we're used to being a sort of a constant influence on our children throughout their, young lives. And then when they get to the teenagers, they don't want it. The caterpillar needs to become a butterfly on its own. You can't alter that. I quote from verse 6, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I mention that book because are we the types to buy a new vehicle, a new motorcycle, and think that, that's the solution if we want to go on a trip, buy a new motorcycle. Then you won't have any problems. Or do we want to work on a motorcycle and get to know it? And that's where the Zen comes in. The Zen of working on ourselves is to accept we can't go and buy a new self. We can't push a button or take a pill and have a magic cure-all. We have to get comfortable working on ourselves. So I talk about, sort of ways to change. You have to become a critic of yourself. Rather than, our society teaches us to criticize others, but we have to become a critic of ourselves. Object to your own bad choices. Say, no, this is not a good choice. Even while you're smoking that cigarette, tell yourself, this is not good. I don't want to be smoking. It'll take time, but you'll get there. Casting a vote for yourself, your true self. Learning to listen to that still small voice within. All right, so, everything I've said, it's not really new, right? Well, here's my question. Why don't we change then? If all of this we all know, we've all heard, and we all eye roll about, why don't we change? And so this is a concept now I'm going to introduce that for most people they would consider radical or, foolhardy or, sort of a bit wacky. But the idea is that your brain is not your mind. This is where psychology and so much of modern medicine that is really on the wrong track. They try and give you pills for your brain, but your brain is not your mind. So I say here, the best idea there is changing your name to change your mind has been unwatered forever. The idea is that the media, the way they control us is they keep promoting things that are useless and they keep avoiding talking about things that are useful. So that's really the situation with changing your name to change your mind. There have been cultures where they did this. There are cultures where how they hand down names is very important. All of that's lost in our culture. So, time for your reaction. You're allowed one of them. It can't be that simple, right? Just changing your name. Doesn't make any sense, right? The name is just a label. It has, no significance. And then, some will start, thinking about going, well, wait a minute, you're saying if I change my name to Bob, then it'll be better. But then, are you saying that all Bobs are the same, all Davids are the same? No. I'm going to agree with you here. but no, I'm not saying that. While I was writing this, on the TV came an old movie called Gung Ho. And I just happened to sort of look over or listen to it at that moment. The interesting thing was the Japanese company bought an American auto company, and they were trying to be efficient. The Americans didn't want this. And there's a lot of contempt and friction. And then at one point, Michael Keaton says to his union co-workers, he says, come on, you got to give me a shot here. Well, that's kind of like what it is with the name thing. In your mind, just give it a bit of a shot. Don't completely discount it. So getting back to change, most of us think we change, we think we like change, we think we're good at change. We really just assume that we're good at change. Well, it's a bad assumption. We don't change, we don't like change, and we're certainly not good at it. That's really a much better assumption for all of us when it comes to change. We change our clothes, we change the channel, we change our toothbrush every so many months because they tell us to. But how many change our toothpaste? How many are still using toothpaste with fluoride in it, even though you're connected with me and my website and my thoughts on fluoride? Why are you? Because it's hard to change. So in this society, what really works, what really sells, is something for nothing and a bit of mystery. We think that the American way is, someone struggles and perseveres and triumphs with a new idea and they turn it into a product, and that's the American way. But really, it goes down differently than that. First of all, successful products have big money behind them. The real American way, the way of the rest of us, is more like I have a great idea, I tell my boss, and he steals it. Or he gives me a pittance for it. Or, and I've had this happen, where they fire you because they're afraid of you, or they're jealous of you. Jealousy is incredibly subtle. And then others, it's like, why should I work hard when others don't? Who do I have to, kiss up to keep my job? Who can I complain about to take the focus off me? I mean, unfortunately, this is the real American way, or the human way. And then sadly, getting back to that something for nothing and a bit of mystery, for a large percentage of the population, it's religion. Someone's in charge of my life, so I'm fine with whatever happens. Well, that's fatalism. That's giving up. That's taking your hands off the wheel and closing your eyes while you're driving. So it's no wonder that these days ghost shows are on all kinds of channels on the dial. It doesn't even make sense which channels they're on. They're just all over the place, and hours of them. What is a ghost show? It's something for nothing, and it's mysterious. You mean you could just walk downstairs and have a weird experience? Yeah, that's free, isn't it? And it's mysterious. Well, it's not mysterious. It's just carefully crafted lunacy. And it's non-thinking. It's feeling instead of thinking. Don't do it. Good ideas. Thinking is dressed like work. It's the opposite of a ghost show. It's the opposite of something for nothing in religion. Changing your brand of ice cream doesn't take a lot of effort. Changing your name does. And so you'll run into a self-motivation problem. You will have, sort of an unconscious internal resistance, and of course a lot of external resistance, unless you really mean it. Then something completely different happens. You start to get some respect, and that's start. We don't really have respect in life. We certainly don't have it from others, and we don't necessarily have a lot ourselves usually, unless we've sort of earned it. So this is the real payoff of this whole concept of changing your thinking your own thoughts, is to start respecting yourself, and then life will show you respect. And when it does that, it'll facilitate things for you. Now the thing is, it'll facilitate things by taking things away. Like half your friends, who you thought were friends but weren't really. Your work. You might lose interest in some aspect or all of the aspects of your work. Your hobbies can easily change. Your passions. And that's good. Go with that. Just be completely focused on what you're trying to change. You're not trying to change your hobbies. You're trying to think. And then let the ancillary things change. Just keep focused on the primary thing that you're trying to change consciously, deliberately, purposefully. And so things will get stripped down at first, but life will leave you everything you need. You'll be alive, and you'll be aware of what you're trying to work on. And you'll have planted a seed. Your seed. The only seed you've got. Your uniqueness, what you have to offer life. In a disrespectful society, respect is king. These are disrespectful times. It used to be we had respect for each other. Of course, it used to be that we dressed up in suits and ties even if we were ditch diggers. Women's liberation kind of threw a wrench in everything as well. And as someone pointed out to me, women's liberation had nothing to do with women or liberation. And it had everything to do with the taxman seeing a chance to gather twice as much tax money. Wow, what an insight that was for me. Right on, whoever told me that. You know who you are. So the irony today is that respect is the most prevalent where it matters the least, in things like sports. The more you change, the more you will see this lack of respect. Because in one area you'll see an increase in respect. You will start to respect yourself more. And you'll just start to realize how much that drives you, how important that is, and how missing it is in life. At first you'll just, your own self-respect will grow and others will shake their heads at you. But in time you'll start to get it from others. But you'll realize that it's just sort of two-edged and it just won't mean as much to you. So, do you want to change? Do you want to change? You're going to have to want to. And if you do, begin by showing respect to others. So let's say you want to change your diet. Well, let's assume that at least one other person on the face of the earth has a really great diet. So you're going to have to start looking at diets, and you're going to have to start sifting through them. And you're going to have to get good at sifting. You want good looks? Well, don't assume that good looks are something you're born with, or even that they're important. Rather, you're going to have to figure out that good looks are an effect. If you're healthy in what you eat, your exercise, your attitude, and your balance, how much sleep you get, your looks will improve. And also, by the way, if you change your name, your looks will definitely improve. Alright, so in this card game, you have to discard before you pick up. Or as Picasso said, every act of creation is first of all an act of destruction. So if you're wondering where to begin your process of change, throw something out. This is really, potentially really easy. And yet, of course, as we see by people's garages, potentially really difficult. Get good at it. Get a dumpster. Have a garage sale where everything is, you deliberately price everything at a quarter of what you would normally price it at. Price it to get rid of it. I've seen, people leaving their garage doors open for days and weeks on end and all kinds of stuff inside. And the funny thing to me is no one takes it. It's not valuable to anybody else. It's just junk. It's just clutter. It's kind of fascinating. I had a locker I was in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver. I had a condo, and it was a beautiful converted office tower, and it wasn't designed with storage and people living there in mind. It was designed for offices, so it didn't have a lot of storage rooms by default. And so they converted little rooms here and there into storage, and I had 2 or 3 of these converted little areas, and one of them was a room that they converted to storage with very chicken wire dividers between our stalls. It was very flimsy, but at the same time only 6 or 8 of us had stalls in there. Anyway, there was a theft. Someone decided to ransack the stalls and steal stuff, but the point is that it was only one of 6 or 8 people. If they had really wanted to, they could have investigated and done something about it, but of course that never happened, this being Canada. Anyway, what was really interesting was my little stall, my little chicken wire thing was broken into and nothing was taken. Or, putting it another way, I couldn't determine if anything had been taken. And it was just a real eye-opener about my junk that I was storing, that it had no value. Really. If anything, it was a minus. And later when I moved, I threw out a ton. And I moved again a little while after that, and I threw out a ton more. And I've not missed any of that stuff. So get good at discriminating junk from treasure. Martin Luther King had a dream about, discrimination. Well, I'm here to say that discrimination is king. We're brainwashed to believe that it's something we should never do because it's bad and illegal and not nice. Well, really, discrimination is what separates the wheat from the chaff, literally. We discriminate all the time, non-stop, about everything, except for that thing that we're not supposed to discriminate about. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't discriminate based on race, creed, and color, but I do discriminate based on attitude. And this is what this talk is about, is changing your attitude. When we are sort of in a passive receiving mode, it controls us, but it also gives us kind of a lousy attitude. So get a better attitude. And part of that is you're going to have to discriminate to get that better attitude. And then you're going to run into people that don't have it, or they're basically not nice in one way or another. Discriminate against them. In other words, not like you're not going to hire them, but choose not to be around them. Choose to turn around and go and talk to someone else. It's not bad. Be proud of it. And be honest with yourself. You do it anyway, whether you admit it or not. Even if you overlay, the words that they've taught us to repeat, you're still doing it. So just don't kid yourself about it. So discrimination is not criticism, and vice versa. Criticism is not discrimination. We're taught to be critics, but not to discriminate. It's really interesting. We see it in our movies. If you look at the movies people watch, it's really staggering how horrible these movies are that people watch. They have no ability to discriminate. And yet you could take a really good movie, and it's really astounding how many people will criticize that movie. They don't know bad from good. It's really kind of shocking. And here's the thing is, the media encourages this. They make huge money off of this. Reality shows, I remember watching some of these reality shows a few years back, and it was kind of shocking to realize that some of the worst people on these shows were basically the most profitable part of the show, because they caused controversy and people got all stirred up about it. You have to be aware of all this. You have to factor this in. Like I say here, comedians as critics I can see. But what happens when everyone is a critic? Well, you don't get critical thinking. It leads to a negative attitude. And a negative attitude can't be positive, so it's not a good thing. Jaded, critical people are not a threat to change the world. They're kind of their own worst enemy. Cynics are easily dismissed. Net effect is the control continues. Criticism is destruction. Discrimination is salvation. It's so easy to destroy. It's so hard to build. Compare an arsonist to someone building a home, a building contractor. One burns, the other builds. Which is harder? I mean, literally, that contractor, not even counting all of his experience, the man hours, he'll take hundreds, maybe thousands of man hours to build that home. The arsonist potentially could spend 1 minute burning it. One of the most famous critics of all time was Roger Ebert, Siskel and Ebert, the movie reviewing pair. And he could figuratively turn his hand down, point his thumb downward, and dismiss a movie. Are you getting much for that? I don't think you're getting anything for that. The funny thing was, at one point, this is quite a while ago, I bought his Ebert's book of the movies that he really liked, and I realized it was all complete and utter rubbish. Almost all movie reviews are complete rubbish, complete garbage. I guess the amount of corruption of people when it comes to movies is very high, and then the inability of the average person to actually discriminate on any kind of a level on a movie is also very high, and so form your own opinions about movies as a good starting point. So discrimination takes effort. If you're going to choose one shirt over another, there might be a number of factors favoring one or favoring the other, and if one of those factors changes, you wear a different shirt. Discrimination is linked to change. Criticism it's not linked to change. I think criticism is linked to doing nothing. It's linked to passivity. It's destructive, and we're trying to grow something here. So discrimination, I say, is salvation. Criticism is conformity. It actually breeds conformity, which is kind of a wild thing to think about. Whereas discrimination is a revolutionary act. If you're going to choose to think your own thoughts, it's imperative that you separate your choices from what the mass is choosing. This isn't easy, and it's going to take muscles, mental muscles, to do it. So here's a test. Let's start with a test here. This one's called Reading Between the Lines. There was a story just recently which part of the story said, researchers from the New School for Social Research in New York have demonstrated that if you read quality literary fiction, you become a better person in the sense that you are more likely to sympathize with others. Sounds very legit, right? Oh, I read this literary fiction and I become a better person and I empathize more with others. Oh, who doesn't want that? Well, there's something not said there. And that is that reading fiction is a complete and utter waste of time. Why do we do it? Again, it's perfect control. Doing something that wastes your time. By definition, you're being controlled. When you're in prison, you're doing something that wastes your time 100%. Everything you're doing in prison is 100% waste of your time. Well, let's think of this as a non-prison approach to life, where we don't waste our time. Don't read fiction. I stopped this decades ago. I don't even know how long ago. I really recommend it. Read a car magazine. It doesn't matter if you're interested in cars or not. Look for something in that magazine somewhere that's interesting. You'll find it. Maybe it's just someone's writing style. Maybe it's humor. Maybe it's just the great visuals and you're like, wow, photography, I should get more into photography. If you look for it, you'll find it. It's not a waste of time if it's real. It's why I like sports so much. But what do most people read? Junk tabloids, trashy novels. And they read television advertisements. They read what's on the screen when the commercial is on. This is assuming they've even muted it, which is probably a bad assumption. It's not by accident that most popular TV shows require very little thinking. For me, Deal or No Deal was one of the great examples of a show that requires basically no thinking at all. But, reality shows aren't much different. A show that interviews celebrities is not much different. They all have a simple formula and they stick to it absolutely for years, forever, which in itself is a form of torture. Why don't they evolve, Dumbing shows down, lowest common denominator programming. It has advantages for them. More people consume. Everyone, now people feel safe and they can talk about show X because everyone watches show X. But we're being taught to, metaphorically, to tube down a river, to float down a river on an inner tube, without being told that there's always a waterfall at the end. We can't just drift through life. Don't do it. And what about your children? Do you really want your children drifting through life? What kind of an example are you being to them? Questions. What is? Why do? How come? Muscle building involves reps. Mind building requires repetition as well. You're going to have to ask questions. You can do this every day. You can ask questions, like in the movie The Matrix. It is the question that drives us. What is the Matrix? Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. Sooner or later, you're going to realize, just as I did, that there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. Those are all lines from The Matrix. The Matrix was a fantastic action movie and very exciting and innovative. But it's a great movie about motivating yourself and changing your thinking. I'd encourage you to watch it again. So take stock. We're taught to save our money. That's sort of one of the big goals of life, right? Make money, save money, work for retirement. So when your body falls apart and you're retired and your body's falling apart, you'll have the time of your life, right? In diapers. It's an absurd thing that we're taught. It's basically to defer anything of any value. Why? Well, not really for any good reason, just because we're told to. So instead, you could consider that you have everything you need right now. That filtering is everything, and you build up your filtering ability, your discriminating ability, by asking questions. So, there you have it. How to think your own thoughts. No time like the present. Get busy.